Morning. I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker. Anton Borzov is a Zen practitioner originally from Ukraine. He now lives in Los Altos, California. He practices primarily with Jikoji Zen Center in the lineage of Kobun Chino Otagawa Roshi. Anton currently serves as the president of the Santa Barbara Zen Center, where he contributes to the Sangha remotely. His commitment to making Zen teachings accessible led him to spearhead the Ukrainian translation and publication of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, an effort to support Ukrainian practitioners by providing Dharma teachings in their native language. Anton's practice is deeply informed by his diverse background in technology and design, bridging the Eastern contemplative traditions with his professional life in Silicon Valley. Anton, we welcome you.
Thank you, John. So Anton, let me, yes, Anton, any opening remarks you would like to make?
No, I think it's a good introduction, and I'm happy to be here with you and to sit remotely for part of the sit-in period with you.
Wonderful. So we hope you return in the future. And let me ask you to go back to your biography a little bit. Tell us about your life in Ukraine, assuming you were born and raised there, and then when you came to America, a little bit of your bio, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So I'm 45 now. So I was born in Ukraine, but it was still a part of Soviet Union, and it all disassembled when I was about 11. So I didn't understand any of that. So for me, it was just normal. So, and then I was into, I think, computers and beautiful things since my childhood. So I kind of combined it and tried to learn and was competing in all this coding competitions, like for computer science and stuff, and eventually joined one of the first web design studios in my home city back then. So this is how it all started, and internet was such a magical thing. All of the creativity burst in, and this is how I got proficient in all of this, and eventually when Yan Kung, who was also from Ukraine, was looking for someone to do the work for the app he was planning to build, which is some of you know as WhatsApp these days. I was basically founding designer, and I was doing the logo, website icons, you know, parts of the interface from Ukraine for the first maybe 4 years. And only after the acquisition of WhatsApp by Facebook, this is where I basically had to move with all my team.
So is that when you came to America?
Yeah. This is how I came to America. So the part of acquisition of WhatsApp by Facebook. And after that, I'm still here for the last 9 years. I brought my family of my wife and 2 kids. The youngest daughter is 12. My son is 23. He just graduated from NYU last year. He studied linguistics and math.
Wonderful. So before we get into the book and all the reasons behind that, think back, if you can, to the first time you confronted Zen. Tell us a little bit about what was going on, how that came about, and what attracted you to Zen.
So I think the first exposure to Zen was in the form that after Soviet Union collapsed, basically there was a vacuum of space and religious and contemplative practices. And I remember my mom was buying all the books, Bhagavad Gita, or I don't know, some magazines about spirituality and religion. So kind of like, you know, it all was accessible for my mom. And I was practicing karate as a young kid, and I bought one of the first books I made myself at the age of, I don't know, 12. And this was a book of koans. So I guess it was early, but my formal practice was only when I came to States, because in Ukraine, I was mostly in and around Christian traditions, Orthodox Christianity, and yeah. So
There was no Zen practice in Ukraine at that time that you know of.
at that time, no, not at all. Like maybe there was, but it's more of kind of like, you know, 1 or 2% here and there. I think it was more related to the interest of, you know, Asian culture. There was a lot of karate movies that we all loved as a kids from like video recorders.
Yeah, good. Okay, so when you came to America, after you came to America, and you were working full time, I assume, raising kids, had
Yeah.
householder responsibilities, etc. How did your first confrontation with the Comanchinos Sangha come about, or your first
Yeah. So
interface?
it was, I think, mostly random, I would say, but nothing random in life. So I was in between my jobs. I ended working for WhatsApp, and then I had maybe a week before I was supposed to have my first day at a new job. And I was looking for some way to kind of like, you know, like take a more active rest, so to say. So I was looking at retreat centers on the map nearby, and I found Jikoji, and they have sessions maybe like 4 times a year. And the session was starting basically as the day that I was doing the search. So kind of like, oh, it's kind of a signal. So yeah, this is basically, I went straight into session practice, not like beginner's meditation course. I didn't know how to meditate properly, so I just came. And this is how I guess keep practicing still. It was about 7 years ago, so not so long time ago.
No coincidence in Zen, huh?
I think so.
So, can you take us back to your first encounter with the practice when you first went to the center there? Tell us a little bit about what happened and what you were either impressed with, positively or negative, whatever, that very first interaction that you had.
It's, I guess, hard to remember.
Mine goes back 1965. So.
I was basically surprised to meet some different cultural representation of life. I think this was, and maybe also how, like, for me, it was surprising because it's a silent retreat and you end up spending a week together, and after the week is done, you get so much closer with people. And I did not expect that, to be honest. So it feels like, you know, first time that you feel the Sangha, you know, that there is a harmonious body, as we chanted today. So yeah.
Kind of,
And I guess teachers, I was somewhat, I think, and first DocuSign, which I don't remember, and I didn't understand any of what I was doing and what I was supposed to bring to DocuSign. Was like, well, so it's, I think, fake it till you make it. This is kind of like,
it takes repetition. It bears repetition.
yeah. But I kept doing this, and it's not the first, I think, session that was. I think then you start to understand what's happening in your body and mind. So in the progression of session, how the perception, your senses change, you kind of like became attuned more, and that's, I think, how not at the first session that I learned this. And then over time, I learned how to sit not using my muscles, but more of a proper posture. So it was not that hard and it was not like excruciating pain in the back. So yeah, you live, you learn, and I'm still learning, and we'll see.
So you became ordained at one point, or you became a
Yeah, it was
disciple?
about a year and a half ago. This we were stitching our rakusus for 6 months prior and doing some form of winter practice periods before. And then some session just before the ordination. And I was lay ordained, yeah, last January in Jikoji.
So does any within that sangha, does any kind of responsibilities or something come with that? How does that work? Your relationship to the community changes?
I don't know yet. I think it's a lot of transitions as with any century. So like there were transitions in Santa Barbara where like we were cycling through, like our guiding teacher stepped off his position and then we were looking for the new one. So because of this connection of Jikoja and Santa Barbara, there were a lot of things and change and play. So I think like it's all changing, not because I got lay ordained, but by the nature of things. Like these things change and you try to
Yeah,
adapt. And I think this is how I ended up serving as a president for the first time, just by nature of me like agreeing to join the board at some point, and then like people come off the board and you try to serve and hold things so they don't fall apart. And it's I think a beautiful changing thing that's
yeah.
part of life that you try to support.
We think of the community as a cloud. My Dharma name's Tai Un. That means a great cloud. So we use Un as our family name. And the Sangha is like a cloud, always evaporating, condensing, re-evaporating, recondensing, and so forth.
Yeah.
You get used to it over time. Tell us about your Dharma name. Is it Angyo?
Hogan Angyo. This is a Phoenix Eye Peacemaker.
What kind of peacemaker?
Phoenix Eye.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
An,
this part of the
an means
name coming.
peace.
Huh?
Yeah, An means peace and Gyo is I.
Uh,
An.
Hogan. The first part is Hogan,
Oh,
and this is
got,
where Phoenix Eye coming from, and Angyo is the peacemaker.
oh yeah, okay. Hogen, that's the Dharma I, right?
Phoenix Eye.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, appropriate name. So let's stop here for a moment and see if anybody else has a question for you so far. John, I know you're in your car, so you're not. It doesn't look like we have many people online, but we have a lot of people in the room. So anyone in the room, please just ask a question or make a comment of Anton.
Yeah, I think you want me to step up.
Yeah, reach the mic.
Yeah, at least get in the frame here. So, hi, Anton.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today. I liked what you said about kind of faking it till you make it in Zen. Could you speak a bit more about being a newcomer to Zen and how you kind of convince yourself that you belong in this kind of ragtag community and that you're kind of contributing in a meaningful way?
Can you repeat the first part of the question? It was like a little bit.
Sure. I was saying I appreciate what you said about kind of faking it till you make it in Zen and kind
Yeah.
of showing up and not really, knowing what you're supposed to do. Could you speak more about your personal experience navigating kind of that feeling of being a newcomer?
Yeah. I think what's I think key thing for me is that it's been reflected. Like what you are in the community, it's reflected from every person in the community. And then you start to notice it. And then kind of like you probably value this, I think, like wholeness made of parts thing. And you And I think there's a lot of, I remember in the beginning, like during first session, there were some, things you don't understand about when you have duties and you have like kitchen work and you have all of it and it's all a mess. Sometimes people don't talk and communication is broken a little bit way. And there's a lot of some small clashes, minor clashes. And while going through that, you start to kind of like understand that it's not about the clashes, and you basically can start absorbing more of that, and that's what's beautiful. That's how you kind of like understand what this practice is all about. So without all these like small clashes, it's hard for you to understand what it is. So yeah, like I'm grateful for how you start with something that makes you bump into each other, and then this is how you understand what are you exactly part of.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Anton.
Anyone else? Yes, please. Down front where you can be on camera so they can see. There you go. So,
Hello. Thank you for joining us. I guess my question is, I guess maybe going into more detail, or like what was exactly your motivation in choosing to become ordained. I think I'm kind of curious about what was your thought process like.
I guess maybe there was because we had I asked to be a student of a person who was just on her way of becoming a teacher. So I asked her even without knowing that she cannot be a teacher at that point. So eventually she became a teacher, and I started my relation with my teacher and practicing together. And this is, I guess, where you get familiar with some other students of the teacher, and you kind of like become the part of the first wave of her students that became ordained. So I think this is about time. So I did not, for some reason, was ready. Like there was a lot of, chaos and COVID things, like people were not practicing together, then practicing together, like no sessions and then sessions again. So just at some point, there was this kind of like, okay, like people came back from COVID, and there was this kind of like, like people were missing, I guess, this. And this was, I think, a part of waves that allowed, like, we had two friendly teachers that were doing the lay ordination Jukai ceremony that day, like, and we had 10 students, 6 and 4. And our other student is actually on the most of the time actually on the east coast, and he's a deaf priest. I don't know if you know Ocean, but he is a part of No Barriers Then practice, and he brought 4 deaf Zen students with him, and it was such a beautiful ceremony and process of this ordination of 10 people. So like it's yeah, not a lot of words.
we have a hand raised. Steve's iPhone. I didn't shut him off. Steve, do you hear us?
I can hear you now. I've never done this on my iPhone, and like many other things, I've never figured out how to do it on my iPhone. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. It's timely, and perhaps it is not coincidental anymore. We have today in St. John's, Newfoundland, up in Canada, there is our first Ukrainian cultural fair. and I will be going to that later today. So yes, Ukrainian culture now extends to Zen. I wanted to make an observation that I was nodding vigorously when you were talking about your first experience on a session, that what you find out about people is how they cut up vegetables, how they react when something goes wrong, and it's only much later, if ever, you find out the things that we are usually concerned about, which is, well, what is your name? What's your job? How much money do you make? So it's much more important how you work with the Sangha. My question for you is this. A discussion that frequently happens in Western Zen is, how will we integrate this, in our case, Japanese tradition into North American values? And you are coming from the East, and the same question must arise to you, is how do you integrate the Japanese Zen into Ukrainian culture? Is it different in Ukraine than it is in the US?
I still don't have huge relations with Zen practitioners in Ukraine. I think I have more connections with Zen practitioners in US, and because there's not a lot of it, and I don't have a lot of intersection of, like friend circles and Zen circles. So maybe my effort to publish a book was in a way to kind of like, I value practice that I met while being in States, and the Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was recorded basically a mile away from where I live in Los Altos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of like how I wanted to, find my connections in Ukraine by publishing this book, who would I have a chance later to have conversations with and find ways to practice. But even for people who were not Zen practitioners, when I was presenting them that book, they were like giving me feedback later. And one of my friends, who is a young female founder from Ukraine, Alyona, she gave this book to one of her friends who was on the front lines, and he was some, you know, young commander position, and he was reading this book on the front lines, and she sent pictures of him making extensive notes and the bookmarks and stuff, and she shared this picture with me. And it's actually kind of like touching thing that where people going through this tremendous struggle and kind of like being like in the trenches, like they kind of like connected with the wisdom that was shared here a mile away from me, recorded on the tape recorder in the 60s or 70s. And yeah, that's touching.
This is wonderful. This is wonderful. I imagine in 500 years, when we meet again, there will be a koan that says, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming to Kiev? Thank you for your teaching.
Thank you for questions.
Anyone else in house? Owen? We've got one. Oh.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I was wondering, you have a family, you're working hard, and then you do all this meditation and take care of a Sangha and write a book. And I was wondering, are you just like one of these people who figured out the 80-20 rule and just do everything much faster than everybody else? How do you find all the time? And does the Zen actually help you do you think it kind of gives you an extra oomph to do everything else? Or how do you get it all juggling all the balls?
I still don't know. I still things fall around me so quickly. I just like have to. I don't know. I think I'm okay with failing in a lot of stuff I do, I guess. Because some of the things I try to do succeed, some of the things I try to do they do not, and that's okay. And I did not publish the book by myself. I think I built a relation with the publisher in Ukraine. Like I was doing the different book, which was about architecture and design, this timeless way of building. I don't know if you know Christopher Alexander, which was also, design thinker and architect from Berkeley in California. So from that, kind of like, like, oh, okay, it's not too hard. You can kind of like just, work with the publisher and translator and like give feedback. It's not taken out of the time, but the process is going while you do something else. So, it's just kind of like, I think this is coming from agency, kind of like, you can just do things like this mentality, kind of like, everyone that I met that were doing things were just doing things.
Yeah,
And
right.
you can just do them. So I don't know, but sometimes you create a lot of problems out of that. Like, I don't know why, when the war started, I think just decided to start helping my friends who were, some of them going to and joining the army. I was organizing friends around me here to send, like ambulances and vacation vehicles and, some protective equipment like medical first aid kits. But then kind of like you start doing this and like it's going and it's hard and but then people kind of like it gets out of media and it's kind of like you are supporting things that's going down and like people don't support you feel alone and it's not always yeah this is about like some things when you start they end up growing and not in a way that you I think expect they will be growing and this I think there was this beautiful interview with Kobon where like he was reflecting on acting in non-enlightened states creates a lot of problems. He called it problems, but it's basically I guess like just consequences, consequences of you starting something and then it keeps living on and so on and creating all these reflections and, consequence. So I don't know.
But if you don't know how you do it, just keep on doing it because it looks like it's going pretty good.
Thank you.
You had me at design thinking there, Anton. That's my big thing. I look at Buddha as a great problem solver. Buddha defined the biggest problem, and he came up with a method for solving it. So I was trained in the Bauhaus tradition at the Institute of Design in Chicago, IIT, and I think I had my book sent to you by the publisher. If I didn't, I need to get your home address. And I think I talk about design thinking and Zen quite a bit. So maybe you could just regale us a little more with your view of design thinking and how you see it relating to Zen problem solving in general.
I think one of the reasons I got so close with Zen is that I found it extremely similar to, thinking about user experience. And one of my latest discoveries, I think Upaya as a, skillful means in teaching or sharing is basically what we do as designers. There's a lot of same terminology and same approaches, like with, progressive disclosure, like coming to person where they are instead of,
Yep.
so I still have these dreams, like probably like some of them dreams will not come true, but some of the dreams I'll try to do something about is about this, I think, finding ways to share what's great in Buddha's teaching and in the way how he was approaching design and product building and sharing the Dharma and sharing the knowledge with how people do design process and build things. And I think Christopher Alexander's book is one of the first combinations of this being cosmological and looking a deeper way how things I think unfold and grow. And
Can you send that to me via email? I will distribute that. Yes. You were saying how things
have
unfold
the
and
English
grow.
version of books next to me, but I'll share you. It's a book from 70s, but still good.
Good. Are you familiar with Buckminster Fuller? He's one of my mentor idols. Good. Okay, so I'm not going to dominate the conversation anymore. Anybody else have a comment or question you'd like to bring up for Anton? Hey, John seems to be gone. So let me ask you another question. When it came to writing the book, you said a little bit about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the inspiration for that came about? What made you choose Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, and circumstances of getting it published?
Yeah. So I think this is one of the books you find at Zen Centers, and obviously I joined one of the reading the classes where we were just reading the Zen Mind Beginner's Mind after dinner with a group of students, paragraph by paragraph. And I guess this is just one of the first books that I went deeply, and I think it became one of the books that's important for me. And I like the nature of the book, that it's coming from attempt to share the Dharma with actual beginners of Zen practice in American culture, which I would say is still closer to, Ukrainian culture than, say, Japanese culture. So like this was one of the very good attempts of, finding ways how to talk about that in the Western culture. So I found it, and because I already did one book published before that, like for me, it was kind of like, okay, it's a good second candidate, and I would like to start this. So I did not do the actual work of translation, but I was doing some editing and kind of like back and forth and trying to see where the translator did a good job and sometimes how to make it better. Some art direction and just like helping financially to make it happen.
Did you use an AI translator or a human translator?
There were no AI translators back then. So it was a couple years ago, maybe like 3 years, when it, finished the translation process. So, yeah.
We have one of our associate colleagues' friend is Red Pine, or Bill Porter. He's done a lot of translation of Chinese poetry as well as Zen tracks. He did the Zen Teachings of Bodhidharma is one of his, and he did one on the Heart Sutra, which is both very compelling. And he explained the translation process as kind of like dancing with the language. It's we recognize that what we're dealing with as Americans reading English is many dimensions removed from the original, not only in language but in culture. And I think we admire Matsuoka Roshi, my root teacher, because he not only translated a lot of works from Dogen, for instance, in his public talks in English, which we've collected, but he also translated culturally. He seemed to have a genius for understanding the American culture and the difference between the
Mhm.
American culture and the Japanese culture from which these teachings originated. So I think translation is not simply language, it's also culture.
I know, yeah. This is kind of like, and then dancing with language is one of the best explanations, I think, because this is, yeah, and I think this is about being alive with your, interactions with people. Because like if there's no response and no landing, like it doesn't work, right? So kind of like you are there with people.
Can you tell us, as an outlander, somebody coming into this culture, you have a unique perspective on it that we don't have, being in the weeds here in the forest for the trees kind of thing. Can you tell us some of the quirkiest things that you've come across in terms of the American culture as compared to the Ukrainian culture, and how you see Zen fitting that picture, the adaptation of Zen as we saw from India, China, Japan, Korea? It had to adapt culturally. Can you see any like kind of abstract view of that maybe would be inaccessible to us or mired in this culture?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know an immediate answer to this. I think like some of the things that I came to respect is that I think US is more multicultural than Ukraine. So and you learn to respect that. This is what makes America unique, is that it is embracing, or at least allows to exist, some other, ways of practice and thinking, and it's not a lot of clashes. I mean, right now at this moment, it's probably harder to say things like this, where like we are, that's polarized.
The phrase present administration accepted kept running through my mind.
Yeah. So, I think there's probably what's also interesting about US is that the cultures are very different in the different parts of states, like East Coast versus West Coast, California versus like Texas, or I don't know all of them, but in my limited amount of travel, I learned how all these different cultural differences allow basically people traveling from one to another and share this, and um that I think we probably have at some extent in Ukraine as well. And what I found here, I think the people still learning in the Ukraine, and when you come to, I think, business environment in Silicon Valley and California, there is a lot of this paid forward mentality that we didn't have. I think like we have more of a scarcity mentality, and it's hard to, I think, it adjust to kind of like, like when people are making interest for you, when they, share first without any expectations of give back. So I think like there's some of the ways to kind of like adapt to that. Yeah, so that was interesting for me, and I tried to kind of like we didn't have that much of entrepreneurship culture, kind of like that translated to business. So I'm also trying to help Ukrainian founders to see that it's possible to um not just being talented to work in the huge company or corporation, but try to create something on your own and be independent and build, be a small entrepreneur and things like this. I think there's some differences, but also I think what's interesting is that when Ukraine has more of a newfound culture for, I don't know, like food and European ways of living. So kind of like coming here, like in some ways, like successful American things stay like this for decades, and you come and you feel like it's a little bit older than you expect. And so like Ukraine has like more modern like restaurants or stuff like this, but you come to the States and kind of like you find something that's kind of like, unexpectedly old. So kind of that's maybe some.
Yep. Yep. Well, one more point on that, and then open up to questions again. When I came to Atlanta in 1970, Matsuoka Roshi moved to Long Beach, and he established the Long Beach Center. And I had mentioned my plan in the back of my mind. I was moving here with the company, a research and design company that I worked with at the time. My whole life was changing, but I thought in the back of my mind, I was going to set up a Zen center here in Atlanta. And the guys in Chicago said, "Southern people don't do Zen." And I said, "Well, that's the whole point, you know." So we consider ourselves the Southern school here. We're the modern Huidong. So in terms of the sort of, I look at Zen as kind of the great equalizer, the leveling effect of Zen practice, in particular Zaojin, and how it may have some potential hope for world peace eventually. Can you speak about your view of the sort of impact of Zen practice on people and through that on the culture itself? Do you see any optimism there for yourself?
I think one of the recent books that I was studying during the practice period was Vimalakirti Sutra. I don't know if some of you are familiar with that. And I think this is such a profound teacher. And household teacher, but his practice is something incredible. So like he's kind of like, interacting from where he currently is a part of, like I am sick because the world is sick. And I will stay sick while the world is sick. I will be with this world. Kind of like, I don't have to kind of like, practice this, highly spiritual, saint-like Dharma. I will be with where I am. And I think this is one of the ways Zen is, I think, unique in this way, or just I think the Buddhist practice is unique. It's kind of like, it invites you to, not go anywhere. Kind of like be here, like you're here, like you can. And for me, like not to run away. Okay, I'm Ukrainian and my country is at war, and some of my friends are, fighting or dying, or like my family is like, but I'm here, like I can, like, how can you combine of not abstracting out from this? So because like there's some tendency of some kind of like doing some spiritual bypassing or stuff like this, but you can still feel some actual pain while understanding, okay, it's a part of reality, like it's who we are as current generation of human beings in the current cultures that we built around ourselves.
Well, that triggers one more question, and then I'm going to shut up and let other people ask. I did a series of podcasts last year called Election Year Zen, in which I tried to profile or look at the campaign, the endless campaign here in this country, from a dharmic kind of perspective. You know, what does it say about the fundamental teachings of Buddhism? And we're witnessing this kind of odd phenomenon, mostly appearing to be human ignorance writ large, right? So you're in a unique position because your country, Ukraine, is suffering tragically at the hands of another human being, actually. I mean, there's no such thing as Russia. There's no such thing as Ukraine. So you have a person in Russia who's waging this war, and you have people in Ukraine who are defending themselves. How do you profile that in your own mind and without falling into demonization, et cetera, et cetera? How do you profile it in terms of your understanding of Buddha Dharma?
Mm,
The geography question is kind of ridiculous. If you think Odessa, you know, I studied some of the great Western books, and they're talking about Odessa back in the early days of the the Greek cities. You know, Odessa is just this hinge point. It's just, you know, like Israel, you know, ever repeating throughout history. It seems like there's no end to it. Talk about karma on a cosmic basis.
yeah, like what I think is like you were asking me like did I translate it with AI or something like this? I was actually I was able to channel my curiosity about because like the thing about conflicts is that you cannot understand this. This is kind of like, you know, it's not possible to actually, you know, there's always some questions. Like you start understanding some things and you go back in history and you go back in cultures and you go back in this and that. And there's actually a million different things that still playing out, and you find them and kind of like, oh, maybe that's why. And then you find some other and kind of, oh, maybe that's why. But there's kind of like there's myriad of this you know, things and consequences that come in from the past and that are just playing out now. And so I was actually you know, having this conversation with you know, Claude as an AI assistant, and sometimes I even posted books about Buddhism and war in Ukraine in one project, and you know, trying to remix and see like if I can have a better understanding of things. So kind of like, you know, but yeah, I don't know if it's possible to understand with mind fully. It's more of a going for you to be present with all the time. You discover some things, you learn something, but then even more questions arise. So
Buddha seemed to profile in the 12-fold chain, the beginning of everything is ignorance. It's kind of an
yeah,
innocent ignorance. It's not willful. Everything arises in ignorance. A tree does not know it's a tree, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at human ignorance, it looks like willful, and it's very difficult to rationalize it in any way. What do they think they're going to gain ultimately, right? It just doesn't
yeah.
make any sense, as you're saying. It just okay. Let me shut up. See, anybody else in the room have anything triggered? Want to bring up? Please come first.
Um, Hello again. Sorry for all the questions. I guess this last part of the discussion made me think of something about I guess in terms of in the situation of Ukraine and like the history of how Zen has slowly come to that nation after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Um, and I was thinking about how this current war, um, how do you think that has impacted the adoption of Zen practice in Ukraine, because you know and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's sometimes easier to like, I guess, embrace these ideas of like compassion and all that when you're not going through all this violence. And I'm thinking about how it like, do you, in your personal opinion, do you think that uh this war has kind of had a negative impact in the way that Zen has been slowly like being adopted by people in Ukraine, or do you think that it has, like, I guess, what's your perspective on the impact of the war in terms of Zen in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think what I noticed is that for people who were practicing and traditions that they are familiar with, and in the case of Ukraine, this was Orthodox Christianity, was some of the organizational leadership and structures of the organization coming from Moscow. So like while I was still there, you could see when we had the uprising and revolution and early 2000s and like 10-15 years ago, you could see how the information warfare was coming even through the channels of spiritual or religious organization, and it was off-putting by a lot of young folks to kind of like who see that kind of like they cannot like be honestly practicing with this. So kind of like seeing how war works through different channels, and probably like you could finally see how I don't know if anyone watched this TV series on Apple TV called Shogun about 16th century Portuguese and Englishmen coming to Japan, and like they were like bringing Christianity, and there was their own practice. So kind of like you could see that our relation between cultures and humans come and like clash, and so obviously because of that there's where you see this conflict of you not being able to practice honestly because there's a conflict. Like I cannot be supporting something that's attacking me, and there's a practice vacuum that's becoming. So yeah, that's, I guess, invitation for other different practice styles like Zen to come and be adopted by people. So like people, I think, I've seen people being curious about Buddhism and, Vipassana or other traditions because of that. So you could see that, any human conflict, I think, fuels curiosity in other cultures too.
Remember one of the last scenes in that series where the two were together and they were chatting, they're looking out over the valley. And at one point, the one guy stands up, pulls out his sword, and cuts the other guy's head off, because that was what was going to happen, and had to happen. And be interested in your comment on what do you think people's relationship to death and fear of death? How is that impelling some of this international conflict, etc.? The problem Buddha approached. Obviously, they're not approaching; they're avoiding. I would say, they're trying to avoid the fundamental problem of existence by bombing another country, for instance. So, any commentary on that? To me, it seems to be a fear of aging, sickness, and death, or an inability to embrace aging, sickness, and death.
I didn't think about like that, to be honest, and but obviously there's a different reaction to death right now in Ukraine, and I think like there is also like technology that I think is driving it too. Like there is all of the you know, Telegram channels with live news, and you see a lot more distraction. Like there's opportunity for you to connect with the war happening like half Earth from you in basically reality TV fashion. So you see a lot of videos of, you know, death happening in front of your eyes. So one opportunity is you go crazy, another opportunity is you do something with your way of absorption it, like another opportunity is you become numb. There's also I see happening in a lot of people who are just kind of like this tolerance of this, you know, constant pain without, I think it just, you know, like accumulates and people are tired. So kind of like there's all of this process that happened because, you know, they are living through war. And some of them lead to more often, you know, like discoveries, like becoming enlightened or something like this. I don't know. Maybe there is more of it. But I also see other ways that war is impacting people too, and not all of them are beautiful. Like I don't know. Like I think my efforts to, you know, be active with this and trying to be present while still being human, while still being caring and curious and loving, and some people cultivate hate when they are being attacked, and like a lot of their friends are dying and families struggling and they're living under explosion. So kind of like, you know, it's all happening at the same time. I don't know how to I I was thinking about our culture as kind of like, you know, like we were not, I think we were more friendly. Like now I see that kind of like, you know, your culture can be hard when being attacked.
Yeah, sure. Nicole has a question. I'm going to ask her to chime in, but one more thing on that. Do you have any comments? And this gets into some critical thin ice territories. Putin claims to be a Christian. Many of the warlike efforts in history have been driven by religion. I think most people look at Buddhism as sort of pacifistic. Buddha was asked about waging a war on a neighboring tribe at one point by some tribal leaders, according to the stories. And he said, he didn't say no, war is bad no matter what. But he said, if both sides will be better off after the war, then it could be considered a just war. So it seems that Buddhism, at least Buddha himself, was not biased in one way or the other, had a more open mind perhaps. But when you look at the Judaic and Christian cultural context that we have, and how they've been so entwined in so many wars or battlegrounds around the world forever, or within memory, and Buddhism comes along, what do you see in that triangle? Can you, and of course there's Islam, throw Islam in for good measure. Is it
Yeah,
a belief system that is rationalizing war?
I hope, I definitely hope, and I see more of the you know, fruits of practice, and there's so far less war happening in the cultures practicing Buddhism. So maybe there's some correlations with that, and I hope there is. But probably if you look 100 years back with Japan, you know, occupying part of the mainland China and Asia, and
Yeah, yeah.
there's still more complexity to it that I can understand. And definitely when I was practicing Zen, and I was noticing that kind of like how come, you know, it's such a peaceful thing. And then kind of like you look at the teachers, and Kodo Sawaki Roshi was, before he became a priest, he was also taking part in the Japanese War, and like he
Yep.
shared some of it. So I guess it's sometimes it's just part of life. I don't know why it happens and what are the triggers for that. Like it's
Sure.
sometimes happening from, as you said, ignorance, sometimes from fear, sometimes from insecurities, or just kind of like as you said, one form of organization after the war is done is better for both parties. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Well, look at
Empires
Japan.
collapsing,
We were
form
at
of
each other's throats, 50 years ago. Now we're best buddies.
yeah.
So, Nicole, did you have anything? Thank you for that, Anton. Nicole, are you still there?
I'm here.
Ah, good. Come forth.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, Nico.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about these complex topics in these complex times. I One of the things I've often wondered about is the intersections between Buddhism and technology, because now my premise I may be starting with an incorrect premise, but I've always kind of thought of technology as something that's been considered as something outside of the human experience, and Buddhism considered to be something that's asking us to be in many ways inside of the human experience in terms of recognizing our interdependence and interconnectedness. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the relationship between, Buddhism and technology, any sort of intersecting points.
Yeah, I think it's always on my mind. And I think you could probably trace it back to times when we were building things with just as means of improving our own lives. Like as humans, we were architects and builders, and like we were creating tools, and it's you could do it in a different ways, and you could see that we as humans like to be in places where we feel alive. And I think there's some correlation between the ability to create places where we feel alive has to do with, our practice. And I think people who practice sometimes create better spaces around ourselves, like in forms of, I don't know, temples, or just, I don't know. I believe there's still some correlations between being in tune with ourselves, and trying to do a deeper practice of contemplation, and how what we build then impacts our lives. And
Thank
I
you.
tend to think about technology that we do now as a next step. So kind of like we were building in physical spaces with buildings and tools and infrastructure and roads and cars. But now we also build things with technology as a digital technology. And there's, I think, even more of that. I think there's even more of, how deeply technologies that we build digital can impact our lives, and what kind of people build products also impacts what kind of products are being built, and then how people are using it. So kind of like, we like have Instagrams and TikToks and Facebooks and WhatsApps, and kind of they're all different, and they all had different and they impact us in a different way. So I'm very curious about how to maybe inform our way of building with more of contemplative practices. And I hope that we bring more of this introspection and practice and build digital products and tools for us that we can still say that we can feel alive in these spaces and not, life being sucked out of us.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Anton. So we have about 10 more minutes. Shinjin, do you have anything you'd like to comment or ask?
No, thank you for being here.
Shinjin is black belt judo, so the karate part he would know more about than I would. Anyone else in the room? Last chance. Okay, Anton, closing remarks on your part. Anything you would like to share with us that we have not talked about?
It is such a pleasure for me to be here with you, and I'm grateful for you inviting me, and this simple act of trying to find Ukrainian practitioners out there in States and share the book and Dharma, and now we sit together and have a conversation. So sometimes the problems and consequences of your actions actually feel good.
Do you have any connections with the Ukraine community in Atlanta, or any contact that you would suggest we make for you here to introduce them to this book?
I don't know if I have anyone in Atlanta yet, but I'll be on the lookout. Like, I think most of my community is either in the California and Bay Area, North California, South California, and also on the East Coast with New York. So that's so far the most of my connections. But I'll be happy to build more.
I'm not sure there's a consulate here, but that's the one thing we can look up. You're in good company. You have a lot of simpatico community members here who are in various levels of IT and various levels of Zen, which I think is
Yeah. Yeah,
construction.
no, I would love to talk separately with you about your, Bauhaus history.
Sure. Well, I'll make sure that the books are sent to you, and I have some. I've done a lot of development around that. I think design is one of the things that's misunderstood. People think of it as interior decoration or something, So be happy to have some conversations with you offline about that.
Thank you so much, Michael and everyone.
So anyone else online?